Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 596. Out now on demand is You Have No Idea, a documentary that chronicles the life of Evan James, who in the early 90s was diagnosed with autism, and his mother Beth, who made it her mission to provide Evan with a life of purpose and friendship. A testament to a mother's unconditional love for her son and the important role that community plays in supporting those who are neurodiverse. You Have No Idea also marks the latest film from director Alexander Jeffery, who I'm glad to say joins me now on the podcast. Alexander, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome.
I'm so glad that I could talk to you today. We're just talking off air about how I have a son who's autistic, and so whenever documentaries or movies that deals with the subject come my way, I always have to check it out because number one, I'm just kind of curious about what's a lot about. And number two, I always find I always like learn new stuff as well. Even though I'm a parent of an autistic child and I've gone through certain things and learned certain things, it's always good to learn more from other people's experiences.
Sure.
Something that's really interesting in regards to your relationship with the people in the movie, though. You previously did from what I remember, a birthday video. Is that right? For Beth, who's the one of the main people subjects in the film. Because it's interesting because I talked to filmmakers that've done short films before, right? And then like
Yeah.
maybe and go to features, but your short film was essentially like a birthday video. It's a different type of gig altogether as a filmmaker,
Yeah.
and that kind of led to the documentary you have here. So how does kind of one go to the other? What was it about the birthday video that you saw potential for something that can be told in a feature documentary format?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we made this birthday video for Beth, basically right before we made the feature version. And one of the things about the birthday video is that it was a surprise to her. So she's not
Mm,
actually on camera telling her story. We're telling it through the lens of her friends and her family that were around her. And they did an amazing job of telling the story, but nobody can tell the story like Beth can.
yeah.
And I think, even though I've been around the family for a long time and known them for a long time and, consider myself really close to them, I learned a ton in the making of the birthday video. I didn't know all of these different stories and journeys that Beth and Evan went through together. And my God, when we're doing that film, I'm just going, this is incredible. And I think we owe it to this story to do it right and to do it as a feature film and to have Beth sit down and tell her story. And also be on camera, with some of the verite stuff that we did and that kind of thing.
So when it comes to a documentary, the resources at hand, especially regards to archival footage and such, sometimes it can be a struggle to find things. Sometimes it's really easy. In the case of You Have No Idea, you were fortunate enough that Beth pretty much recorded almost everything in
Yeah,
Evan's life. And we're talking about like in the 90s recording stuff. Like we're not talking about iPhone kind of stuff that people do now, right? Video
right.
camera footage, all sorts of stuff. And especially after his diagnosis, like they're just recording a lot of stuff because I'm sure with her, not only she was like, just wanted to chronicle his life and what was going on, but maybe in the back of her mind, she was developing kind of like this kind of advocate position on that she is very much now. And it's such not only great educational tools that can provide, but also, as it turns out, perfect fodder for like a documentary, right? So once you get all these videotapes in your possession, what's your first kind of instinct? It's like, yes, I got all this stuff, or oh my God, there's so much footage. How am I going to fit this in like a 90-minute feature?
That probably that one. I mean, the interview, I think we had 30 hours of interviews alone. And I mean, thank goodness Beth had all of this documentation, like you said, not only the great videos, but also incredible photos of the
Yeah.
entire journey. And I wish I could say that we did this documentary the way you're supposed to, where you go through all of your archival footage first and figure out what the storyline is. But we were really kind of putting the puzzle together as we went. And it was just amazing to me that some of the stuff that they talked about in the interviews, we ended up having archival footage that perfectly touched on that subject. Like, for instance, when they were working with Evan on pointing, early on in his um, language development process, and we have all this great footage of people working with him on pointing to what he wants. So just kind of like serendipitous moments like that through the making of this film were just continued to blow my mind that we had everything that we needed to tell this story in a way that felt, you could probably do it with just talking heads, but it wouldn't be as interesting.
When Evan knows that you are filming this documentary. What's his kind of reaction to that? Because I imagine, like, maybe I know what it is with my son sometimes, like if you put him in a situation like a different kind of living situation or a transition situation, or you might have to bring in a new kind of element to their life. And I'm not sure, and I'm pretty sure doing a documentary like this, especially during COVID, it was like moments where it goes on and off, on and off. That could
Yeah.
be a little bit disruptive and a little bit of cause a little bit of a headache. Did Evan at first kind of like take to it in a kind of difficult way, or because you knew the family beforehand, did it make it kind of easier to with the process in regards to his involvement?
He really surprised me with how naturally he took the camera. I mean, he didn't skip a beat when we started coming and filming. And we did a test process. It wasn't like forced on him. We really kind of wanted to do a trial run to see, okay, how is this going to go? And he was amazing. The camera really didn't bump him at all. And one of my favorite stories is, as we're winding down the process of doing the interviews and doing the filming, and we're coming less and less, he would go up to Beth and Paul and say, movie star? And movie
Mm-hmm.
star meant, where are Paul and Alex and why aren't they filming me right now?
Mm-hmm.
So he really became accustomed to the process, and it was almost a routine to get him out of the filming process because he enjoyed it so much.
Please support Matt's movie reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. And the interesting thing about Evan is that when the film touches on his evolution of his communication skills, that he
Yeah,
is essentially a filmmaker in his own right. He
totally.
uses images, collages of images to kind of express things that maybe he can't do verbally, but he uses images from different things like Disney movies, etc., to go about that. So I'm sure for him, having the movie stars in his with him and doing the whole filming and everything like that, it would have just increased his appetite more for that type of that type of art, that type of communication through the filmmaking process.
Totally. You're absolutely right. Like, he is a storyteller in his own right. The way he takes photos of still frames on the TV and puts these stories together that, again, tell something about what's going on in his life or whatever. It's incredible. And I do remember at one point, like early on, we showed him playback on the monitor of
Mm.
himself. Like, we showed him a video of himself. And so he kind of got the idea, like, oh, I'm going to be on TV. And just put the biggest smile on his face when he saw himself on the screen, and early in that process of seeing himself in the situation, watching the playback. I think he got it right away. He's like, okay, I know what we're doing here now.
So Evan was diagnosed in 1991. So my son was diagnosed like how many years ago? Maybe 7, 8 years ago. I'm just trying to remember. Maybe less, 5, 6 years ago. I always
Okay.
say to my wife, I always say, thank God we are born. He was born like now, like in this present
Yeah.
day, where there's so much information and other things. Because even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, where we're talking about now with Evan, the information and the diagnosis and the suggestions and everything else was very primitive in its nature. And it's not by any fault of the doctors or scientists or whatsoever. Just people just didn't know what was going on. There's a lot of research to still be done. There's a lot of things happening.
Yeah.
And I'm sure when it came to Beth, some of the suggestions I was given to her, that not only will Evan not lead a productive life, but he'll probably have that secluded one, just wasn't good enough. So I imagine just watching the chronicle of how Evan's evolution through Beth's hand was something to behold. I know for myself just watching it as well. I mean, it's hard enough now to taking my son to therapies as such, doing it back then when there's like hardly anything resources as such. And Beth was pretty much being very innovative in the way she approached it. It was quite something to watch, looking back at all that stuff when you're piecing this story together.
Oh, I mean, she is just a incredible human being, and somebody I think that makes everybody around her, live up to their fullest self. And yeah, I'm continually amazed by the work that she did at that time. I mean, even to get in the car and drive to Las Vegas because, hey, they're doing a convention about autism, and we've just heard this word for the first time. Let's
Mm,
show up and see what we can learn. I mean, it really was this attitude of, there's nothing out there. We can't, like she says in the documentary, we're not going to go on Google because Google doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's get in the car and drive to Las Vegas and see if we can learn anything at this conference. And that really was a pivotal moment for them because they discovered that book, that Let Me Hear Your Voice book, which at the time I think gave them a lot of hope because this woman that wrote the book was in similar boat to them, where the sort of recommended therapies at the time just weren't working for her child. And so I think that was a big kind of turning point in the story for them as okay, well, these are the things we're going to seek out and these are the things that we're going to do.
And I think the other thing that Beth did so well, which is essential, I think, for anyone who has a child who is neurodiverse, is the need to put together a support system of some kind around
Yes,
to really help, and not only, in the case of this case, not only help Evan, but to help Beth and her first husband, Dennis, and later on her second husband, Paul. It's really
yeah,
essential that support system is there. And I know for a fact, I mean, not only do we have like a to always keep in close contact with our therapists and stuff as well. But I have my parents helping us out as well. We have, other family members who are very kind of supportive and such. Beth, the great thing about Beth is that her transparency in regards to the whole thing, she never approached Evan with any notion of shame, with any notion of disappointment. It's like, this is my child, this is what God has blessed me with, and I'm gonna make my best to make it work. But hey, I'm going to need your help to do it. So the whole notion of the village, which is talked about throughout the film, is something that's
yeah,
very inspiring, I think.
yeah. I think she really had when you think about it, I think she had a really progressive look at it for the time because I
Yeah,
think
absolutely. Yes.
the standard sort of notion at the time would be to hide or to, not be as forthcoming about the situation as she was. And it really ended up being the best thing because not only are those people just such a integral part of Evan's life, Evan has brought all of those people so much joy just by being a part of their life. And I'm very lucky to consider myself one of those people. Like I love the fact that I know Evan and that when I show up, he gives me the biggest hug and is happy to see me. Like it's the coolest thing. It's having him in your life is incredible.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you love. So something we're going through now with my son, he's turning 12 this year, is trying to have him be a little more independent. We're trying
Yeah,
to get him to make his own breakfast, what else. So there's stuff he can do on his own, but there's other stuff we're still working on that he's behind other kids, of course. And I
sure.
think what Beth does really terrific with Evan as well is that she always wanted to make sure that he has the tools to be as independent as possible. And you
Yeah.
see that through the film as well. He does live in his own place at I forgot what they call it, home, what do they call it in the movie again, a home place or a
I think it's considered a group home. Like there are
group
lots
home.
of
Yeah,
people, other people living in the home, but he has his own bedroom, and has
group
that independent.
home. College, Magnolia College, he
Yeah,
does that as well.
yeah, yeah,
And then or he has certain tools that he can do on his own, including like the communication aspect of it as well, which I just found
yeah.
absolutely incredible. So when you're around Evan and like you see him in all these kind of different places and see him do all these different stuff, how impressed are you with the way that he's been able to kind of really navigate his life and he can really kind of create not only his own voice in his own unique way, but his own presence as well as his own person, because I think that's incredibly important as well when it comes to this aspect.
Yeah, I think the thing that really strikes me about Evan is his confidence. And,
Mm,
he loves having people around and, he might not be around those people like at all times. Like if we're over at the house, he might come say hi and then go back to his room. But just
mm,
knowing that you're there is super important to him. And like he'll walk around a party, like when his dad had a birthday party and there was tons of people in this house. I mean, he's the most comfortable ever. He's got his headphones in. He might be doing his own thing on the phone, but he is totally comfortable in the presence of all these people, wants to say hi. Everybody's happy to have him around. And he can sort of jive and do his own thing and also be in his own space too. So I think it's so cool that he loves that presence of people and that relationships are really important to him. And that, like you said, he has this way of communicating through storytelling, through images, through movie quotes, even.
yeah.
Um, like he almost communicates in, these boiled down ideas, whether it's a movie quote that expresses something that he's feeling, or like saying movie star and having that represent the documentary. Like he's really great at communicating his needs and his wants, and I think the way that he and Beth have figured that out together is really incredible.
And I think it's really clever on Beth's on behalf as well to kind of like have that aspect of the arts be so important in Evan's life. And
Yeah.
it brings me to another question when we talk about El Dorado, Arkansas.
Yeah.
From when we're looking at like the Burns family, you had Dennis, who was like a singer who did theater. Beth did her stints as well. It seems like a very kind of artistic family, and it seems like that even El Dorado, Arkansas, in its own, has a very kind of artistic kind of hub towards it. Am I correct in that? Is there like a very thriving kind of scene there in regards to theater, and also is there a thriving scene there in regards to filmmaking as well in the film industry, considering that you're part of that dynamic as well?
Yeah, El Dorado's always been a very unique place with the arts. It's always been supportive of the arts. We have an art center there that, it's been around for over 50 years. I can't remember the exact number now, but like I grew up on the stage at the art center doing plays and watching Dennis do plays and be just totally blown away by him as a performer. And Beth was the executive director at the art center, and so many people in Evans Village have either been on stage or behind the scenes or that kind of thing at the art. So I think there is a really great arts community there. And it happened to be, a lot of those people that really embraced the situation and became part of the village. And then, we started a film festival there in 2014, and I was a part of that. And, I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a thriving filmmaking scene there. I don't want to be dishonest about that. But again, that embracing of the film industry and having a festival there and, hosting out of town filmmakers, and I think El Dorado has really embraced me as a filmmaker, and other people from the community that have gone off to make films. Yeah, it's really cool that that aspect of El Dorado does exist.
I want to talk about the editing of the film. So we know we have all these archive footage. We know we have the interviews themselves. I'm pretty sure I remember I heard you say that Beth's interview on her own was like 4.5 hours, right? So
Yeah.
you've got content, you know how to piece it together. I think something you do really clever, which also adds a personal touch to it in regards to Evan's own personality,
Yeah.
is the VHF motive. You have chapters in there, but it's done with I imagine it's Evan's hand putting the tapes into the VCR. Is that correct?
So it's actually my hand, because
Okay.
with the day that we ended up going back to film that, Evan wasn't at the house. He was back at his group home in Magnolia. So, but the idea was that the audience it didn't necessarily have to be Evan's hand, but that the audience could interpret it as Evan's
Yes.
hand. And that we're sort of, like you said, telling the chapters of the story through the VHS, and rewinding and going back. And that's kind of how Evan watches movies, is he might watch this section and then rewind to the beginning and watch
Mm.
this section. And so, yeah, we sort of discovered that very late in the editing process. I'm ashamed to admit, because it really does feel obvious, like this is the way to tell the story when you sit down and think about it. But that kind of came to us pretty late in the game, as we were editing, and we were like, okay, I feel like we have all the beats, and I feel like we have, the right sound bites in there, and there's just something that's missing. And then, of course, it hit us, and we're like, obviously, this is how we have to do it. And that's when the movie, I think, really came together, for me, and started feeling like, okay, this is cohesive, and it works, and it makes sense.
I know the film is out now on demand with Amazon and Apple TV and such. I'm curious though, have you created a VHS physical copy for Evan to have in his collection? Because I think that'll be a nice little touch for his collection of Disney classics to have his own film amongst that.
That is such a good idea, and I can't say that I have done that yet, but I have a new mission for this week, and it is going to be to do that. That's a great idea.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Amazon Prime Video. One of the best on-demand streaming services available, Amazon Prime Video features exclusive Amazon originals as well as popular movies and TV shows. Watch Amazon Prime Video anytime, anywhere. Because I don't know about you, but it seems like these kind of like old technology kind of things are kind of, look, they're not going to be back to where they were, of course, but there's a bit of a kind of like a a pull from the younger generation to have these kind of like older things. Like I don't know why, but
Yeah.
vinyl's huge now. I think last year vinyl outsold any other physical stock of music. Supposedly cassette tapes with music,
Yep.
like there's like limited releases of that, and even like, and I think more for horror features than anything else, VHS is coming
Yeah.
through as well. So are you ready for the VHS revolution to start coming back,
Look,
Alexander?
I'm all about it. And like you said, I think it is pretty big in horror, which makes sense because it's, that sort of cult following of the horror films. And like, I think having a VHS is kind of, it's this cool thing to have, even though the quality of it's not great. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's the thing. So, I mean, look, I think that's a great idea for this movie. I'm all about it. If Good Deed wants to put out some VHS tapes, I think that would be the way to go.
I think it'll be an awesome. If anything else, it'd be great just to have a few of them out there, just to
Yeah.
give a little tribute to Evan keeping the VHS flag alive.
Yeah.
Speaking of Evan, has he seen the movie yet? I know he's seen bits and pieces while you're filming, but has he seen the film as a whole? And if he has, what type of reactions does he have watching it?
Yeah, he's seen the film multiple times. So he watched it prior to any of our festival screenings, by himself in the living room. And he kind of would come in and out during that. And I think he was kind of getting used to it. And then at the Hot Springs Documentary Film Festival, when we premiered, he sat in the audience and watched the whole film. And he gets really into it. Like anytime a person comes up on screen, like, when we first introduce a person and their name pops up and it says what their relationship to Evan is, like he'll say their names out loud in the screening because he's just happy to see them on the screen again. And I think so it's funny, most recently we changed the song at the very end of the film, the You've Got a Friend in Me. It was the original Randy Newman version for a while, but we couldn't afford to license that. So for our festival run, we had a festival license. And then when it came time to release the film, my good friend Andrea Von Kampen, who I made another movie with, she did the recording of that. And so this most recent screening that we did in late March, that version of the song was in, and you could kind of tell that Evan was like, okay, this isn't right. This isn't the version that I've seen.
Mm.
And again, it's a routine for him. So I think he's adapting to this new version with Andrea's cover of the song in at the end.
Well, I think it's a beautiful touch at the end because Evan's love for Disney is just clear throughout. He even had that party that one time, right, where a lot of people like dressed up in the characters and such. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's my son's the same. His obsession now is Sonic and Mario. He's just all Sonic and Super Mario. It's like in
Oh,
Godzilla.
cool.
That's another one as well. And every day it's like a new fact. He learns a new fact, and like I'm up to here with facts bursting out of me about kaijus and Sonic and everything else.
Yeah.
So the movie is out now for everyone listening. You have no idea. It's available on video on demand. I really recommend, I know Apple TV and Amazon both have it, but Amazon is a better way to go right between the two because they got like the algorithm and all that. So that's like the best way to go. So if people out there do want to watch You Have No Idea, check it out on Amazon. I really recommend everyone watch this movie because myself as a parent who's raising an autistic child, I can say without a doubt. And I've seen a bunch of documentaries on this. This has to be one of my faves. And I think that what it comes down to is the just how intimate it is and just how transparent it is. And also for me who has read up on this stuff, it's just terrific to see another person's personal experience and just seeing the evolution of not only Evan's life, but also in a sort of way how the knowledge of autism in itself has grown with him. And I think a lot of that has to do with the especially in his world, Beth's remarkable work that she's done with him. And Alexander Jeffery, congratulations to you with capturing all this and putting it onto this document, this film that people can see for generations to come. I think it's terrific. You're a movie star in my book as well, so good on you.
Well, thank you so much. It means a lot. It really does.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.